Hi everyone, welcome to Difference Frames the World, a channel where you can see the world differently. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification so you will not miss our videos uploaded every day. Today, we talk about the tension in the Taiwan Strait when China's mainland just finished live firing drills around 100 kilometers away from the main island of Taiwan. In a previous video about Beijing's Joint Sword 2024B, we pointed out that military exercises would be shorter and more frequent, and our argument proved correct 1 week later. The live firing drills occurred 1 week after Beijing launched the Joint Sword 2024B military drill wrapping the island. Many flights to and from Fuzhou, the capital of Fujian province, were delayed or cancelled due to the 4-hour airspace control caused by the drills. The live firing drills lasted only 4 hours, even shorter than the previous exercise, Joint Sword 2024B. Both Beijing and Taipei called the drills routine. However, this time, as the live firing drills were so close to the island, analysts thought Beijing was sending a different message than usual, not only to Taiwan but also to foreign forces like the US and Canadian warships, the US destroyer USS Higgins and the Canadian frigate HMCS Vancouver, which trespassed the Taiwan Strait on October 20, 1 week after Beijing's Joint Sword 2024B exercise. Beijing's live firing drills on October 22, shortly after the US and Canada's provocative actions crossing the Taiwan Strait, demonstrated Beijing's anger and served as a stern warning. The exercises were also a prelude to a large-scale campaign, a gray zone warfare to normalize military besieges and exhaust Taiwan over a lengthy period. In the past 75 years, China's mainland has never given up its claim to the island as part of its territory, and all Chinese leaders vowed to take back Taiwan by force if they had to. However, Chinese President Xi Jinping seldom mentions peaceful reunification with the island as he used to. The time for Taiwan's return to its motherland is seemingly approaching, despite the interference from the United States and its allies. The U.S. Pacific Fleet has prevented China from becoming a united country for nearly 8 decades. In recent years, however, the quick rise of Beijing's military power has forced the United States to summon its allies, like Germany, Japan, Australia, New Zealand and Canada, to counterbalance China's increasing pressure. The question is whether a group of wolves can threaten the awakening dragon. Moreover, America's current focus is on the conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, as Ukraine and Israel are both craving Washington's support. Even if the U.S. abandons Ukraine, Israel can still create enough trouble for the United States. As a result, Washington wanted to ease tensions with Beijing, so it took the US and Canada 1 week to decide whether they should cross the Taiwan Strait for the so-called navigation freedom, after the Joint Sword 2024B exercise. Beijing was quick, though. The live fire drills started after the US and Canadian warships passed the strait. The collective West regards the Taiwan Strait as an international waterway. However, Beijing considers the strait its internal waters, saying China has sovereign and administrative rights to the Taiwan Strait, rejecting America's claims that part of the strait is international waters. Even though most countries in the world, including all Western powers like the US, Britain, France, Germany and Australia, to name a few, acknowledge there is only one China and Taiwan is a Chinese province, the Western nations led by the United States try to internationalize the Taiwan issue. Most Western media consider Taiwan a self-governed island, or a so-called democratic country. The island and the mainland have been apart for many decades, and many Taiwanese, especially young people, want to maintain the status quo, making it challenging for the mainland to take back the island without arousing some Western nations' criticism. The US and its allies are waiting for Beijing to take military action against Taiwan so they can sanction China's mainland as they did to Russia. The only problem for Beijing is whether it is worth sacrificing economic gains for national unity when it has to take over the island by force. It is not easy to make a decision. As we said earlier, China needs to maintain a sizable growth rate to keep society moving, and if not, the country will have too many problems. The first half of 2024 saw a 4.8% GDP growth, which is not low for most economies, but not good enough for China. In recent months, Beijing unveiled unprecedented stimulation policies to boost its economy, comparable to China's 4 trillion RMB investments when the US subprime crisis plagued the world 16 years ago. In the short run, China's mainland is more motivated to maintain the status quo in the Taiwan Strait than the United States, as the time is on Beijing's side. The Chinese People's Liberation Army does not have to use hypersonic missiles to assault Taiwan, as the water in the strait is shallow, and the distance between Taipei and the mainland is short. With Taiwan's military strength, the DPP cannot withstand Beijing's attack, even with America's antiquated weapons. In 1683, the Battle of Penghu to take over Taiwan lasted 7 days only. With China's military power today, some pessimistic Taiwanese analysts say Beijing can defeat Taipei's army in 4 hours, which is somewhat exaggerated. Even though it is not hard to recover the island militarily, the consequences can be fatal to China's economy. Beijing is making preparations, economically and militarily, to deal with possible consequences arising from the forcible reunification. In addition to the Belt and Road Initiative, China is actively pushing the expansion of BRICS nations. The latest news shows that Turkey submitted its application to join the BRICS, sparking concerns about its commitment to NATO. Besides, one cannot overestimate China's influence in the global South nations. Like the late Chinese leader, Chairman Mao, who united developing countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America to resume China's seat in the United Nations, Chinese President Xi Jinping is making friends with as many nations as he can so he can win international support and enhance China's cooperation worldwide with most countries. It is worth mentioning that the 5 founding members of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, generated more wealth than G7 countries in 2021. With more countries joining BRICS, BRICS will contribute more to a multipolar world. BRICS has 9 members: China, India, Brazil, Russia, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates. Dozens of other countries keep in touch with BRICS, either becoming members or in alternate forms. China is seemingly preparing for the worst and striving for the best. Under Chairman Mao's leadership, China suffered from embargoes by the West for several decades, like today's Cuba and North Korea. After China quelled the riot in Tiananmen Square in 1989, the West also sanctioned Beijing for years. Beijing and South Korea, an ally of the United States in Asia, established formal diplomatic relations in December 1992, 3 years after the Tiananmen Square incident, as a significant step to reconcile with the West. In the early 1990s, G7 countries contributed nearly half of the world's GDP, so China had to deal with them carefully. Today, China's contribution to the world's GDP exceeds that of G7 nations combined. It still needs the world to develop its economy, but it does not rely as heavily on the West as it used to. If China decides to take over Taiwan by force, it is least likely that the Western countries will send their troops to defend the island. During the 2 joint sword exercises, America's aircraft carriers and warships stayed hundreds of miles away to avoid miscalculation and misjudgment. What will the US and its allies do in a war between Beijing and Taipei? The answer is simple. Deplete their outdated weapons on the island as they are doing in Ukraine. The question is whether they can ship those weapons onto the island when Beijing's warplanes and destroyers block all air and sea ports and prevent foreign vessels and aircraft from entering Taiwan. China's Liaoning aircraft carrier appeared east of the island during the Joint Sword 2024B exercise, showing Beijing's resolve to impede foreign interference. Although the West will not interfere with the Taiwan issue militarily, they will sanction China if Beijing launches the reunification war. What sanctions will the West impose on China? Beijing can obtain a list of potential sanctions from Moscow and learn from President Putin how to evade or nullify those sanctions. Russia's economy has not fallen apart because of sanctions imposed by unfriendly countries in the past 3 years, even though it has experienced difficulties. Likewise, China will not collapse even if Western nations turn against Beijing. Of course, the Chinese economy will be adversely affected. However, Western nations will suffer more if they sanction China, as they did to Russia. Without reasonably priced Chinese commodities, inflation will ruin their economies. It will be a lose-lose situation if they follow the United States to sanction China. Today's Europe is miserable because of the Ukraine war. Ironically, the United States is better off selling excessively priced LNG to European countries when the latter cease to buy Russia's cheap natural gas. The United States and its allies need China's commodities to fight inflation, as not everyone in the West can buy made-in-America products that are 10 times more expensive than those from China. Still, one should never underestimate Western politicians' stupidity and how political correctness can ruin a country like Germany. Taiwan is part of China, and reuniting with the island is China's internal affairs. However, some Western countries pretend to be deaf and blind, trying to internationalize the Taiwan issue to stop China's rise. In short, China has to do its best and prepare for the worst.